Okay, white pointer sharks. Now, what I'm about to tell you is what I've learned from abalone divers and professional fishermen on the west coast of South Australia and Tasmania, waters where there are a lot of these sharks. And they're not marine biologists, neither am I, but this is what they believe. Now, the white pointer is different to other sharks in the way it hunts because it develops a preference for mammals at a certain point of its development for some reason, possibly because mammals travel slower through the water. You'll see them coming into places like Port Lincoln following schools of tuna. Tuna move at enormous speed through the water, and the white pointer can go faster, and it has to catch them. So that uses a lot of energy, and maybe that's why they start to develop a preference for seals, which move slower, so it would be easy to catch in theory. So at some point in its development, the shark develops a preference for seals and mammals in general, including human beings, of course. Now, it discovers a few problems with eating mammals. Mammals generally have bigger and denser bones than fish. So, for example, a seal big enough to satisfy the appetite, something like a white pointer, would be a big bull seal. But if it goes and chomps into a bull seal, it will have some of its teeth broken. And sharks don't like having their teeth broken. It makes them vulnerable. To what? What would a white pointer be vulnerable to? Well, of course, sharks are cannibalistic, and white pointers have a bad habit of eating each other. So if you've got a reduction in the number of your teeth, well, anyway, generally speaking, white pointers don't like having their teeth broken. So maybe it's for that reason that you observe the documentaries with spectacular footage that people have been able to capture of them attacking seal colonies. They generally go for the baby seal. I mean, clearly it's a more vulnerable target, but it's not much of a meal for something as big as a white pointer. But they've got small bones, and the shark doesn't get its teeth broken. You see, they go to all sorts of effort to eat a baby seal. They'll actually jump out of the ocean onto a beach to catch a baby seal. They like eating them that much. And there's a reason for that. They're tasty, I'm sure, but they don't get their teeth broken. That's what abalone divers will tell you, okay? And that actually sounds reasonable to me. Now, the shark develops a different style of hunting when it starts hunting mammals, because mammals are generally a lot more brainy than fish. The seal can get away if it sees the shark before it attacks. So the normal behaviour of a shark, like grey nurse and bronze whalers, in my personal experience when I've been diving and so on, is they circle you. You see them before they attack. This is no good for the white pointer if it's hunting mammals like seals. The seals will get away. So instead, it relies on its senses. It hangs back beyond the visual range of its prey and sum up its prey using its extraordinary sensory system. And it will try to decide whether this is a suitable meal for itself. And then it comes in at an enormous speed from the gloom and takes one great big chunk out of its prey. And then it backs away. It backs away and it hangs around back in the gloom, and it listens for the heartbeat of its prey and waits till its heartbeat stops and then comes in to finish it off. Now, what would happen if it attacked something that had big heavy bones that broke its teeth? Well, you see this with surfers and people who are divers in the water, and, people generally swimming who are attacked by white pointer sharks. They'll get a whole leg taken off, or a whole section of their torso or an arm or something, and then the shark doesn't come back. Why doesn't it come back? You're a tasty human, it's a huge shark, why doesn't it come back to finish off the meal? Because, most likely, it's come in, chomped in on the part of the body where there's a big solid bone and had some of its teeth broken, and it backs away. And so you could survive, with horrendous injuries, but the reason why you survived is because you broke a few of the shark's teeth. Now, for this reason, abalone divers have now developed a habit, quite a few guys, of wearing a chainmail vest, so that if the shark does bite into them, that it will break some of its teeth and it will just let go. It's like becoming a lobster, with a hard shell. Now, I actually talked to a guy who's an abalone diver over in New South Wales. I had to go see him because he had been chewed on by a white pointer shark and he was back in the water 3 weeks later. So I thought that was extraordinary. And I went over to meet him. I live next door to a guy who's got a fish factory, so I jumped in his semi and went over there when he was going over there because I wanted to meet this guy. He was a Greek guy. Him and his sons were abalone divers and had been for forever, and they weren't going to give it up. And he related how the shark came along and bit into him, and his whole body was bruised, and he had lacerations, where he bled. He lost quite a bit of blood, but the shark didn't bite down on him because he was wearing this chainmail vest thing. So that's the habit of the white pointer shark from what I've come to learn. Now, I know 2 people who've had face-to-face encounters with white pointer sharks in the water, and unlike you see in documentaries where people get in the water and they give you the impression that these things are like big pussycats or something. One of them is a marine biologist by the name of Dave. That's all I know. His name is Davies. He's over in Ceduna, and he's got really curly hair, big, tall, lanky guy. He's actually an expert on white pointer sharks, if he could actually talk anymore. Now, he actually had a face-to-face encounter with a shark in a tuna net. And what had happened, he put him into a state of shock, and he's still in it. The last time I came across him, he was walking down a bush trail out on the outback of Ceduna with bare feet, and I stopped and I said, "G'day, Dave, isn't it? How you going, mate?" And he just looked at me, and they just carried on walking. And he's been like that ever since this encounter with a shark about 10 years ago. Now, another fellow I know who had a face-to-face encounter with a white pointer was my good mate Martin, who was in the SAS. Now, when he came out of the SAS, he decided to go abalone diving because there's a lot of money in it. And he was on the bottom, and he had a bag of abalone behind him. As he went along, he had like a little spatula thing. You just pop the abalone off and stick them in the bag, and he could feel something tugging on the bag. Now, these divers have what's called a hooker rig. They're on an airline, so they don't have to keep coming up like you have to with air tanks or with snorkel. So they work for hours on the bottom. So he could feel this dragging, this tugging thing, and he assumed that a bag of abalone had got caught in some rocks. So he turned around, and he said he saw the whole head of a white pointer shark chewing his abalone. So he went underneath the rock ledge with his hooker rig, and the shark disappeared. He obviously let the abalone off and let the shark eat that. And he became paralysed with fear. And it was about 2 hours before the guy on the surface who was in the boat manning the compressor on the diving tender realised that there was something seriously wrong here, because he hadn't moved for 2 hours, and he actually had to pull him physically from the bottom by his safety line to get him back on the boat. And Martin's never been back in the water since. Now, for me, I hooked a white pointer shark when I was in a 13-foot boat. There was 3 of us in the boat, and we hooked a 12-foot white pointer. Now, I was totally drunk at the time I'm doing this, and I actually tried to land the stupid thing and started dragging the boat on its anchor, and then it turned and started to charge the boat. Now, we quickly cut the line, started the engine, and ran for the shore. And I've never been back in the ocean since, and I don't intend to be. So there are a few anecdotes about white pointer sharks, but I think that these facts that I've gleaned about white pointers, about their hunting habits, and why they will only chew off a whole section of a surfer but not finish them off, and so on, that actually sounds like pretty sound reasoning to me. I think that's probably true of this particular species of shark. And that's what makes them different to other sharks. They're like mammals, they start to hunt them, and their behaviour reflects that. Okay? Take it or leave it. That's my experience. See you later.